Hello economists, and welcome to another video about microeconomics for the A-level. This video looks at area 413, which is termed price determination in a competitive market, and it is vastly revisit material with a tiny little snippet of new stuff to take a look at. Essentially, this is all about supply and demand. It goes through a few different markets, and it covers a huge topic, often causes students a number of problems, called elasticity. And there are 4 types of elasticity that we'll go through. Anyway, taking it through the slides that you've got here, the first area is 4131, and that is the determinants of demand. So just the demand side. So we've got a classic definition there about being willing and able to buy. We've also got a very handy term to remember is ceteris paribus, which always enables you to paint clearly in the examiner's eye that you understand that everything else must remain equal for the conditions to be met on a diagram. We'll also have a little look at various effects on the demand curve. Here obviously we've got the income effect and the substitution effect, so how would incomes affect the consumption of a certain product if incomes rose, and what if a substitute product has changed its price? How's that going to affect the demand for the product you're looking at? So there's a couple of key bits of theory there. One nice little acronym here is WIPI. And WIPI here, W-I, 3 P's and an I, are the factors that determine the demand for a good or service. Not something that often gives students many worries, but it's still quite a nice acronym to remember. So that's WIPI, affecting the determinants essentially of demand. Other things to remember about demand is the actual curve itself, and the curve can shift, or there could be movement along the demand curve. And essentially, movement along the demand curve occurs if there is a change in the price. Everything else is pretty much going to lead to a shift. The second section is one of the troublesome areas, and that is elasticities. And here we cover 3 elasticities. They're all based on the demand side. And as I said earlier, we'll go through these in class. But there are generally things you must know about elasticity. Yes, you should be able to define elasticity, and we're looking at PED at the moment. You certainly need to know how to calculate it, and there's a formula there. And notice how that quantity is on the top. That's a general rule to remember. You need to know how to interpret the result of an elasticity calculation. Very important. Not just the actual number and what that says, but of course whether or not it's elastic or inelastic. We will do some calculation practice in class, but crucially it's very important you remember the things that are important to a business. So price elasticity does inform us a lot about the amount of revenue that a company can raise, and I will show you a lovely little diagram highlighting that. I kept this slide in because you may have been taught about SPLAT. SPLAT used to be, and is still very relevant, but again another nice acronym, essentially informing you about the things that determine the price elasticity of demand. We've got a new one which I'll introduce later on, which is more in line with the new AQA spec. And there's a little bit of diagrammatic explanation there as well, for elastic and inelastic values. And we can go on to about the company effect there. The bottom line with PED is it's all about revenue. Then we've got income elasticity of demand. We've got the usual stuff with the definition. We've got again the calculation, and we've got a little bit about the interpretation down here. Very important. And the thing here to remember is sign and size. So what is the sign? Is it negative? Is it positive, the number? That tells you whether it's inferior or normal. And how big is the number? That will tell you whether it's elastic or inelastic. Also in this section we have a little bit about normal and inferior goods, and of course a little bit more about why a business would want to know the income elasticity of demand. And there are a number of things here: sales forecasting, pricing policies, diversification, and how a business should react within the business cycle, the boom and bust cycle, as you might know it, the economic cycle. So there's 4 factors there for a business to consider when it establishes its YED figure. Next, we've got cross-price elasticity. And again, this looks at a relationship between 2 goods here. Again, notice the quantity on top. And again, sign and size are important. Okay, so what is the sign? Is it negative? Is it positive? If it's negative, they're going to be complementary goods. If they're positive, going to be substitutes. And we also want to know, well how responsive is that product to a change in the price of the other product? The size of the number will tell us whether it's an elastic response or an inelastic response. And of course, again, we revisit, why is this useful to a business? And there's a few things there to consider. But I'm not going to spend too long looking at that, because I know I'm going to cover that when we get into class with elasticities. It's a classic multiple choice question as well. Also on here are the 3 acronyms. I say acronyms. The first 2 are pretty good. We've got things, and these are the factors that determine the PED. We've got pint, which they're the factors that affect YED, and the rather unfortunate SCT, which means nothing at all, but they're the handful of factors that influence the cross-price elasticity of demand. The next section looks at supply, and it's very similar. Again, very easy stuff. Definition of supply, a couple of links you can look at there. The law of supply, exactly the same as the law of demand, and a little bit about a movement along a supply curve. Okay, and the sort of words we should be using when we refer to that contraction and expansion. We have a long list of factors that can affect supply there, so you don't need to remember them all, but a good handful would be good. And again, we can see some shifts here diagrammatically presented. 4134 then looks at the final elasticity, and this is PES, this is price elasticity of supply, and again notice quantity on top, and again you always get a positive number. So what we're more interested in here is how responsive the business is to a change in price. So how many can they supply? There's a nice example here about whether it's a short-term response or a long-term response. Just scooting down here, we've got a little bit more about why price elasticity of supply is important to businesses. We've seen that before, and I'll go through all of that in class. And then finally, we're on to the actual equilibrium. So you've gone through demand, you've gone through supply, you put them together, and we have an equilibrium point. And this is usually what determines the price and the quantity of output within the market. So this is very standard stuff. Market clearing might be a new term. That is where supply does equal demand, the market will clear. If the market doesn't clear, it usually means we're in a state of disequilibrium, which would mean there's excess supply or excess demand, which can be a short-term position until the market forces take effect. And then 4136 runs through a handful of key terms. Classic, I would say, multiple choice questions here, but we need to know why some markets are related to each other, and there should be some things you recognise here. Joint demand, competitive demand, composite demand, derived demand, very important for labour markets later on, and finally your supply. So if there's anything there you want to go back over, please rewind the video. Make sure you've got your A-level textbook in front of you, your A-level exercise book in front of you, and taking notes. Essentially, all of this should be in your AS book, but it's good practice to go back through it and rewrite some of those key terms. Remember your red books, they can be used for diagrams, but they're also very, very handy for creating a glossary of key terms. And there's many key terms in these more basic sections, such as the ones we've seen today in 413. Thank you.